The tears streaming down her face caught the afternoon sunlight like diamonds, but there was nothing precious about the despair etched into every line of her body as she sat crumpled on the courthouse steps in Independence, California, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul. Harrison Owens had only come into town to sell a string of horses he'd broken over the past 3 months, his saddlebags heavy with the money he'd earned, when he saw her there. A vision of misery that stopped him dead in his tracks. It was September of 1883, and the heat of the day was beginning to fade as evening approached, casting long shadows across the dusty main street. He'd been about to head into the saloon for a drink before making the ride back to his ranch, but something about the way this woman sat there, her dark hair falling loose from its pins, her hands covering her face, made him change direction entirely. "Madam," he said softly, removing his hat as he approached. "Are you hurt?" She looked up at him with eyes the color of spring moss, red-rimmed and swimming with fresh tears. Her dress was simple but well made, a deep blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, though it was dusty at the hem. She couldn't have been more than 23 or 24, he guessed, and the devastation on her face made something in his chest tighten painfully. "I'm ruined," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Completely ruined." Harrison glanced around, noting the few townspeople who were openly staring, and made a quick decision. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you off these steps. The whole town doesn't need to see you like this." She looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to trust him, then accepted the hand he offered. Her fingers were cold despite the warmth of the day, and they trembled in his grasp. He led her across the street to the small restaurant run by a kindly widow named Mrs. Patterson, who took one look at the young woman's face and immediately ushered them to a private table in the back. "Coffee," Harrison told Mrs. Patterson, "and maybe some of that apple pie if you have any left." When they were alone, he sat across from her, giving her space but staying close enough to offer whatever comfort he could. "My name's Harrison Owens. I've got a horse ranch about 10 miles north of here. And you are?" "Catherine Morris," she said, her voice still shaking. "I was Catherine Morris. Now I don't know what I am." He waited, letting the silence stretch between them until she was ready to speak. Mrs. Patterson brought the coffee, and Catherine wrapped her hands around the cup as if trying to draw warmth from it. "The judge," she finally said, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Judge Whitmore. He ruled against me today. My father died 6 months ago, and he left the farm to me in his will. But my uncle contested it, said a woman couldn't possibly run a farm alone, that it should go to him as the nearest male relative. And the judge agreed." Harrison felt anger kindle in his gut. He'd heard of Judge Whitmore, a pompous man who held traditional views about women's capabilities. "That's not right," he said firmly. "If your father wanted you to have the farm, that should stand." "It doesn't matter what's right," Catherine said bitterly. "What matters is what the law says, and apparently the law says I'm not capable of managing my own inheritance. My uncle gets everything. The house I grew up in, the land my father worked for 30 years, the livestock, everything. I have 30 days to vacate the premises." She laughed, a broken sound. "I have nowhere to go. No money except the few dollars my father had in a tin in the kitchen, which my uncle will probably claim as well. I have no family except my uncle, who clearly doesn't care if I starve in the street." Harrison's mind was racing. He'd seen injustice before, had experienced his share of it when his own father had been cheated out of land by a crooked surveyor. But there was something about Catherine's situation that struck him particularly hard. Maybe it was the way she held herself together, even as she fell apart. Or maybe it was the fire he could see beneath the tears, a strength that hadn't been completely extinguished. "How big is your farm?" he asked. She looked at him in confusion. "About 160 acres. Why?" "And what did you raise?" "Cattle, mostly. Some chickens. We had a good well, and Father had been talking about planting an orchard." Her voice softened when she spoke of her father, and Harrison could hear the love there. "Could you run it? If you had the chance, could you manage it?" Catherine straightened in her chair, and some of the defeat left her face. "I've been running it for the past 3 years, she said with quiet pride. "My father's health was failing, and I managed the books, hired the hands, handled the buying and selling. He taught me everything he knew. Of course I could run it." Harrison leaned forward. "Then we're going to get it back for you." She stared at him. "You don't understand. The judge has ruled. It's over." The judge ruled based on the assumption that you couldn't run the farm alone, that you had no means of support, Harrison said, his mind working through the possibilities. What if that assumption was wrong? What if you had a partner, someone with experience in ranching, someone who could vouch for your capability? I don't have a partner, Catherine said, bewilderment clear in her voice. You do now. Harrison met her eyes steadily. If you'll have me. The silence that followed was thick with shock. Catherine set down her coffee cup carefully, as if afraid she might drop it. You're proposing a business partnership? With a complete stranger? I'm proposing whatever it takes to keep you from losing your home, Harrison said. If that means a business partnership, fine. If it means something more formal, well, we can discuss that too. Catherine's cheeks flushed. You mean marriage? I mean whatever gives Judge Whitmore no legal ground to stand on, Harrison said. Look, I know this is sudden. I know you don't know me from Adam. But I've got money saved, I've got experience with cattle and horses, and I've got no patience for injustice. Your father wanted you to have that farm, and by God you should have it. Why would you do this for me? Catherine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't even know me. Harrison considered the question. He could have said it was simple decency, or that he hated seeing people taken advantage of, or that he had nothing better to do with his money. All of those things were true, but there was something else, something he couldn't quite name, that had taken root the moment he'd seen her on those courthouse steps. My father spent his whole life building something, he finally said, and it was taken from him by men who were more interested in their own profit than in what was right. He died bitter and broken, and I swore I'd never let that happen to anyone else if I could help it. So maybe I'm doing this for him as much as for you. But I'm also doing it because when I saw you sitting there, I thought about all the times I wished someone had stepped in to help my family. Someone with resources and knowledge and the will to fight back. I can be that someone for you, if you'll let me. Catherine was quiet for a long time, studying his face. Harrison let her look, knowing she was trying to take his measure, trying to decide if he was genuine or if this was some kind of trick. He understood her caution. The world wasn't kind to women alone, and trusting the wrong person could lead to worse situations than the one she was already in. Tell me about your ranch, she finally said. So he did. He told her about the 200 acres he'd built up over the past 5 years, the horses he bred and trained, the small but sturdy cabin he'd built with his own hands. He told her about his plans to expand, to maybe bring in some cattle, to build a real house someday. He told her about the isolation, the hard work, the early mornings and late nights. He was honest about all of it, not trying to paint a prettier picture than reality warranted. I'm not rich, he said, but I'm comfortable, and I know what I'm doing, and I'm good at what I do. If we combined your land with mine, if we worked together, we could build something substantial, something worth having. And if I said yes to a marriage, Catherine said, her voice steady now, what would you expect from me? It was a fair question, and Harrison respected her for asking it directly. I'd expect a partnership, he said. I'd expect honesty and hard work. I'd expect you to pull your weight, which it sounds like you're more than capable of doing. As for the rest, he felt his own cheeks warm slightly. I'm not the kind of man who forces himself on a woman. We could figure out the personal side of things as we go, if we go that route. Let it develop naturally, or not at all. The main thing is getting your farm back and keeping it. Catherine took a long drink of her coffee, and Harrison could see her mind working behind those green eyes. She was intelligent, he could tell, and she was weighing all the angles, considering all the possibilities. My uncle won't give up easily, she said. Marcus Morris has always been a stubborn, greedy man. When my mother died 10 years ago, he tried to convince my father to marry his wife's sister, just so he'd have a connection to the farm. When father refused, Marcus never forgave him. He's been waiting for this opportunity. Then we'll have to be smarter than he is, Harrison said. When does the 30 days start? Today. The judge gave me until the end of October to remove myself and my belongings from the property. That gives us time. Harrison pulled out a pocket watch and checked it. It's too late to do anything more today, but tomorrow morning we can go see a lawyer. A different lawyer, not whoever your uncle used. I know a man in Bishop, about 40 miles north. He's honest, and he knows the law better than most. We'll lay out the situation and see what our options are. I can't afford a lawyer, Catherine said quietly. I can. Consider it an investment in our partnership. Harrison paused. So, are we doing this? Are we partners? Catherine looked down at her hands, then back up at him. In the lamplight of the restaurant, with the evening settling in around them, she looked young and vulnerable, but also determined. I don't want to lose my home, she said. It's all I have left of my father. If you're truly willing to help me, then yes, we're partners. Harrison felt something settle in his chest, a sense of rightness that surprised him. Then the first thing we need to do is get you somewhere safe to stay tonight. Do you have friends in town? Catherine shook her head. We lived outside of town. I don't know many people here well enough to impose on them, and I don't want to go back to the farm tonight. I can't face it, knowing that it's not really mine anymore. Mrs. Patterson rents rooms above the restaurant, Harrison said. Let me talk to her. 5 minutes later, it was arranged. Catherine would stay in one of the small but clean rooms upstairs, and Harrison would sleep in the livery stable with his horses, as he often did when he stayed overnight in town. It wasn't fancy, but it was respectable, and it meant Catherine would be safe and chaperoned. As they climbed the stairs to the rooms, Catherine turned to him. Harrison, she said, using his name for the first time. Thank you. I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you. He touched the brim of his hat. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start fighting back. That night, Harrison lay in the hay of the stable, listening to his horses moving in their stalls, and wondered what exactly he'd gotten himself into. He'd meant every word he'd said to Catherine, but now that he was alone with his thoughts, the magnitude of what he'd offered hit him. Taking on another person's legal battle, potentially marrying a woman he'd just met, combining their lands and their lives. It was reckless, impulsive, completely unlike his usual careful approach to life. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was Catherine sitting on those courthouse steps, broken and alone. And he knew he'd made the right choice, no matter how crazy it seemed. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the September air crisp with the promise of autumn. Harrison was up before the sun, washing at the pump in the stable yard and changing into the cleanest shirt he had in his saddlebags. He was waiting outside the restaurant when Catherine emerged, wearing the same blue dress but with her hair neatly pinned up and her face composed. Only the shadows under her eyes betrayed her sleepless night. Mrs. Patterson had fed them both a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, and fresh bread, refusing payment despite Harrison's protests. You're doing a good thing helping this girl, the older woman had said firmly. The least I can do is make sure you both have full bellies before you head out. The ride to Bishop took most of the morning. Harrison had borrowed a gentle mare from the livery for Catherine to ride, and they made good time on the dusty road that wound through the Owens Valley. As they rode, they talked, filling in the gaps of their lives for each other. Catherine told him about growing up on the farm, about her mother's death from pneumonia when Catherine was 14, about taking over the household duties, and gradually learning the ranch work alongside her father. She spoke of her father with deep affection, describing a man who had believed in her capabilities when most men wouldn't have. He never had a son, she said, but he never treated me like I was less than one. He taught me to ride, to shoot, to understand cattle and crops and weather. He taught me to keep books and to negotiate prices. He said there was no reason a woman couldn't do anything a man could do if she had the right teaching and the will to learn. He sounds like a wise man, Harrison said. He was, and that's why it hurts so much that his own brother's trying to undo everything he wanted for me. Harrison told her about his own childhood, growing up in Texas before his family had moved to California when he was 16. He spoke of his father's loss and eventual death, of his mother following a year later, heartbroken and worn out. He explained how he'd worked on other people's ranches for years, saving every penny, until he'd finally been able to buy his own land. I've been alone for a while now, he admitted. It's not a bad life, but it gets lonely sometimes. I've thought about finding a wife, but I never seem to meet the right woman. Most of the women around here are already spoken for, or they're looking for something more than a hardscrabble horse rancher can offer. And now you're considering marrying a woman you just met, who comes with a legal battle and a hostile uncle, Catherine said with a hint of dry humor. That's quite a change from lonely bachelorhood. Harrison glanced at her and was surprised to see a slight smile on her face. It was the first time he'd seen her smile, and it transformed her features, making her genuinely beautiful rather than just pretty. "Well," he said, matching her tone, "I never did like doing things the easy way." They reached Bishop just after noon and found the lawyer's office on the main street. James Wright was a man in his 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He listened carefully as Harrison and Catherine explained the situation, occasionally jotting notes on a piece of paper. "Judge Whitmore is known for his conservative views," Wright said when they'd finished. "He's ruled against women's property rights before. However, he's also very concerned with appearing proper and following the letter of the law. The question is whether we can find a legal avenue to challenge his ruling." "What if Catherine weren't alone?" Harrison asked. "What if she had a husband with demonstrated ranching experience?" Wright leaned back in his chair, studying them both. "How long have you two known each other?" "Since yesterday," Catherine said honestly. "But we're discussing the possibility of marriage if it would help my case." The lawyer's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a commitment to make for someone you just met." "It's also quite an injustice to lose your inheritance because of your gender," Harrison said firmly. "Is a marriage a valid reason to appeal the ruling?" Wright tapped his pen against his desk. "Potentially. If Catherine were to marry before the 30 days are up, and if her husband were willing to co-manage the property, we could file a motion to reconsider. We'd argue that the judge's concerns about her ability to manage the farm alone are no longer relevant, as she wouldn't be alone. It's not guaranteed to work, but it's your best shot." "What about the fact that the marriage would be happening specifically to circumvent the ruling?" Catherine asked. "Couldn't the judge or my uncle argue that it's not a legitimate marriage?" "They could try," Wright said, "but as long as the marriage is legal and properly conducted, there's not much they can do about your motivations. People marry for all sorts of reasons, practical considerations among them. It's not up to the court to decide whether you married for love or for mutual benefit." Harrison looked at Catherine. "What do you think?" She was quiet for a moment, her hands folded in her lap. "I think it's risky, for both of us. Marriage is a serious commitment, and we barely know each other. If we do this and the appeal fails anyway, we'd still be married. You'd be stuck with a wife you didn't really choose, and I'd be dependent on a husband who might come to resent the bargain." "That's a valid concern," Harrison said, "but I meant what I said yesterday. I believe you deserve to keep your farm, and I think we could make a good partnership given time. I'm willing to take the risk if you are." Catherine met his eyes, and he could see her weighing everything in that sharp, intelligent mind of hers. "If we do this," she finally said, "I want it to be a real marriage, not immediately, not the personal aspects until we're both ready, but a real partnership. Equal say in decisions, fair division of work and profit, honesty between us. I won't be a wife in name only, existing on the margins of your life. If I'm going to tie my future to yours, I want it to mean something." Harrison felt a surge of respect for her. She wasn't desperate enough to accept scraps, wasn't willing to trade one form of powerlessness for another. "Agreed," he said. "Equal partners in all things. We build something together, and we both have a say in how it's built." Wright cleared his throat. "So you're decided then? You want to proceed with a marriage?" Harrison looked at Catherine, giving her one last chance to back out. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes," she said. "We're decided." The lawyer nodded. "Then I suggest we move quickly. We'll need to get a marriage license, find someone to perform the ceremony, and file the motion to reconsider with the court. The sooner everything is official, the stronger your case will be." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. They obtained a marriage license from the county clerk, with Wright vouching for them when the clerk looked skeptical about their brief acquaintance. Harrison found a small boarding house run by a respectable widow named Mrs. Chen, who agreed to let Catherine stay there for the next few days while they made arrangements. He bought Catherine a simple gold band from the jeweler on Main Street, refusing her protests about the expense. "You're going to be my wife," he said firmly. "You'll have a ring." They found a minister willing to perform the ceremony the following afternoon, giving them a day to let the reality of their decision sink in. Harrison took Catherine to the general store and insisted on buying her a new dress, something nicer than the simple cotton she'd been wearing. "You should have something special for your wedding," he said, "even if the wedding itself is unconventional." Catherine chose a dress of deep green wool, practical but pretty, with delicate buttons up the front and lace at the collar. When she emerged from the changing room, Harrison felt his breath catch slightly. The color brought out her eyes, and the cut of the dress showed off her figure. She was lovely, and for a moment he allowed himself to think about what it might be like if this marriage became more than just a legal strategy. That evening, they had dinner together at a small restaurant, and the conversation flowed more easily than it had before. They discovered shared tastes in books, a mutual love of horses, and similar views on honesty and hard work. Catherine had a sharp wit that emerged when she felt more comfortable, and Harrison found himself laughing more than he had in months. "You know," Catherine said as they walked back toward the boarding house, the evening air cool around them. "When I woke up yesterday morning, I never imagined this is where I'd be today. Engaged to a cowboy I'd never met, planning a wedding to save my farm. It feels like something out of a dime novel." "A dime novel would probably have more dramatic moments," Harrison said. "Maybe a shootout with your uncle or a daring rescue from a burning building." "Please, let's avoid both of those," Catherine said with a laugh. "I've had enough drama for one lifetime, thank you." They stopped outside the boarding house, and an awkward silence fell between them. This was the moment when a normal couple might share a kiss goodnight. But they weren't a normal couple, and neither of them quite knew how to navigate the strange territory between strangers and spouses. "I'll be here tomorrow morning," Harrison finally said, "around 10 o'clock to pick you up for the ceremony." "I'll be ready." Catherine hesitated, then held out her hand. He took it, shaking it formally, and they both laughed a little at the absurdity of it. "Good night, Catherine." "Good night, Harrison." He watched her go inside, then walked back toward the livery stable where he'd arranged to sleep again. His mind was spinning with everything that had happened, everything that was about to happen. Tomorrow he would be a married man. Tomorrow he would take on Catherine's fight as his own. Tomorrow his entire life would change. The wedding itself was a simple affair, held in the small church with only Wright, Mrs. Chen, and the minister's wife as witnesses. Catherine wore her new green dress, and Harrison had bought himself a new shirt and had his boots polished until they shone. As he stood at the front of the church waiting for Catherine to walk down the aisle, Harrison felt a nervousness he hadn't expected. This was supposed to be practical, strategic, but it felt remarkably real. When Catherine appeared in the doorway, her hair pinned up with small white flowers Mrs. Chen had tucked in, her face solemn but calm, Harrison felt something shift in his chest. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was brave. She was walking toward an unknown future with a man she barely knew, putting her trust in him because she had no other choice. He silently vowed to make sure she never regretted that trust. The ceremony was brief. They spoke the traditional vows, promising to love and honor each other in sickness and health, for richer or poorer. When the minister said, "You may kiss your bride," Harrison leaned in carefully, giving Catherine time to pull back if she wanted to. She didn't. The kiss was chaste, just a brief press of lips, but Harrison felt it all the way to his toes. "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Harrison Owens," the minister said, and just like that, it was done. Catherine was his wife. They signed the marriage certificate, Wright serving as one witness and Mrs. Chen as the other. The lawyer promised to file the motion to reconsider with the court first thing Monday morning, along with copies of the marriage license and certificate. "Judge Whitmore will have to respond within 2 weeks," Wright explained. "Either he'll grant a new hearing or he'll deny the motion. If he denies it, we can appeal to a higher court, but that will take time and money." "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Harrison said. His hand was on Catherine's back, a light touch, but he could feel her trembling slightly. The reality of what they'd done was settling in for both of them. They had a small wedding meal at the restaurant, joined by Wright and Mrs. Chen, who proved to be a delightful storyteller with tales of her own unconventional marriage to her late husband. "We married for practical reasons too," she said, her eyes twinkling. "He needed someone to help him run his laundry, and I needed a way to stay in the country. But we ended up very happy together for 42 years until he passed. Love doesn't always come first, but it can come." After the meal, Harrison and Catherine faced the question they'd both been avoiding. What happened next? They were married, but they had no home prepared for both of them, no settled arrangement. "We should go to your farm," Harrison said. "Or rather, our farm. You need to be there, and we need to make it clear to your uncle that you're not leaving, that you have every right to stay." Catherine nodded. He's probably already started moving his things in. He was so confident the judge would rule in his favor. They purchased a small wagon and loaded it with supplies from the general store, along with Catherine's few belongings from the boarding house. The ride back to Independence was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. As they traveled south, the landscape opened up around them, the Sierra Nevada mountains rising to the west, their peaks already dusted with early snow. It was nearly dark when they turned off the main road onto a smaller track that led to Catherine's farm. The house came into view, a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch, and Harrison felt a surge of anger on Catherine's behalf. This was a good property, well-maintained and clearly loved. No wonder her uncle wanted it. There was a light burning in one of the windows, and when they pulled up to the house, the front door opened. A man stepped out onto the porch, tall and heavyset with graying hair and a scowl on his face. "Catherine," he said, his voice hard, "you're wasting your time coming back here. You have 30 days to get your things out, and that's all. This property belongs to me now." Harrison climbed down from the wagon and helped Catherine down, his hand firm on her elbow. "Actually, Marcus," Catherine said, her voice steady, "this property belongs to me and my husband, Marcus Morris, meet Harrison Owens." The color drained from Marcus's face, then rushed back in an angry flush. "Husband? You expect me to believe you got married in the 2 days since the hearing?" "Believe what you want," Harrison said, his voice calm but with an edge of steel. "The fact is, we're married, and we're filing a motion to reconsider the judge's ruling. This farm belongs to Catherine by right of her father's will, and I'm here to make sure she keeps it." "This is ridiculous," Marcus sputtered. "You can't just marry some stranger and expect that to change anything. The judge ruled that she couldn't manage the property alone, and that's still true." "She's not alone anymore," Harrison said. "She has a husband with 5 years of ranching experience, solid finances, and a good reputation. The judge's reasoning for giving you the property no longer applies." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Who are you really? Some con artist she found to help her cheat me out of what's rightfully mine?" "What's rightfully yours?" Catherine's voice rose, and Harrison could hear the anger beneath it. "This farm was never yours, Marcus. My father built it, my mother helped him build it, and I've worked it for years. You have no right to any of it." "Your father was my brother," Marcus said. "Family looks after family. This property should stay in the Morris bloodline." "I am the Morris bloodline," Catherine said fiercely. "I'm his daughter, his only child, the person he chose to leave his legacy to. You're the one trying to steal from family." Harrison stepped forward, putting himself slightly between Catherine and her uncle. "This conversation is going nowhere," he said. "The law will decide who this property belongs to. In the meantime, Catherine and I will be staying here. If you've moved any of your belongings in, I suggest you remove them now." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue further, but something in Harrison's stance must have convinced him it wasn't worth it. "This isn't over," he said finally. "I'll fight this marriage scheme of yours." "You're welcome to try," Harrison said, "but we'll be right here, working this land and proving we can manage it just fine." Marcus stomped back into the house and emerged a few minutes later with a bag of his belongings. He climbed onto his horse, which had been tied near the porch, and rode off without another word, disappearing into the darkness. Catherine let out a long breath. "That went better than I expected. I thought there might be actual violence." "The night's not over yet," Harrison said. "He might come back with reinforcements. Do you have guns in the house?" "My father's rifle and shotgun, and a pistol." Catherine led him inside, and Harrison looked around with interest. The house was comfortable and well-furnished, clearly the home of people who had cared about their surroundings. There was a large main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, and stairs leading to the upper floor. Through doorways, he could see a parlor and what looked like an office. Catherine lit lamps throughout the downstairs, and they did a quick inventory of what Marcus had touched. It seemed he'd only been in the house briefly, perhaps just to assert his ownership. Nothing appeared to be missing. "There are 3 bedrooms upstairs," Catherine said, her cheeks slightly pink. "You can take the guest room. It's smaller than the main bedroom, but it has a good bed and a window facing east." "That's fine," Harrison said, understanding her unspoken relief that he wasn't expecting to share her room. Let's get our things inside, and then I'd like to take a look around the property before it gets completely dark." They worked together to unload the wagon, and Harrison was impressed by how efficiently Catherine moved, how well she knew her own home. She showed him where everything belonged, the rhythms of the household clearly ingrained in her. After stowing their belongings, Harrison did a circuit of the property in the fading light. He counted about 40 head of cattle in the near pasture, all looking healthy and well-fed. The barn was sturdy and well-maintained, with 4 horses in the stalls and room for more. There was a chicken coop with a dozen hens, a root cellar, a smokehouse, and a good well with a hand pump. The fences were in decent repair, and he could see where the fields had been planted and harvested. It was, he realized, exactly the kind of property he'd dreamed of having someday. Combined with his own land and horses, they would have a substantial operation, if they could keep it. When he returned to the house, he found Catherine in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal of bread, cheese, and apples. They ate in comfortable silence, both of them exhausted from the emotional upheaval of the past few days. "I know this is strange," Catherine said as they cleaned up after the meal. "Having you here, being married, all of it. But I want you to know I'm grateful. Whatever happens with the court, you've given me hope when I had none." Harrison dried the plate she handed him. "We're going to win this," he said. "Your father wanted you to have this farm, and you deserve to keep it. We'll make it work." That night, Harrison lay in the guest room bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Catherine's house. He could hear her moving around in the room down the hall, the creak of floorboards, the rustle of fabric. He thought about the strange turn his life had taken, how he'd gone from solitary horse rancher to married man in the space of 3 days. It should have felt wrong, forced, but instead, it felt like the beginning of something right. The next morning, they rose early and fell into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Catherine made breakfast while Harrison fed the animals and checked the fences. They worked together to muck out the stalls, and Harrison was pleased to see that Catherine knew her way around a barn and wasn't afraid of hard work. "I need to go back to my place," he said over lunch. "I have horses that need tending, and I should bring some of my stock over here so we can start integrating the operations. Will you be all right here alone for a day or two?" Catherine straightened her shoulders. "I've been running this place alone for months. I'll be fine." "I know you can handle it," Harrison said, "but your uncle might try something while I'm gone. Keep the guns close, and if anyone gives you trouble, fire a shot in the air. The neighbors should hear it." "I'm not a child, Harrison," Catherine said with a hint of irritation. "I know how to protect myself." He held up his hands. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm just worried about leaving you so soon after we got here." Her expression softened. "I appreciate the concern, but this is my home, and I'm not going to hide from Marcus or anyone else. Go take care of your horses. I'll be here when you get back." Harrison left that afternoon, riding back toward his ranch with mixed feelings. Part of him was eager to check on his own property, to make sure everything was in order, but another part of him was reluctant to leave Catherine, to put distance between them when their partnership was still so new. His ranch looked exactly as he'd left it, the cabin sturdy and welcoming, the horses greeting him with familiar whinnies. He spent the rest of the day catching up on chores, all the while planning how to combine his operation with Catherine's. He could bring his best breeding horses to her farm, use her better pasture land. Her cattle could benefit from his experience with animal husbandry. Together, they really could build something impressive. That night, alone in his cabin, Harrison admitted to himself that his feelings about this marriage were more complicated than he'd acknowledged. Catherine was smart, capable, and beautiful. The more time he spent with her, the more he found himself attracted to her, not just physically, but to her strength and determination. He'd gone into this marriage thinking of it as a practical arrangement, but he was beginning to hope it might become something more. The next morning, he packed up his essential belongings, caught his 6 best horses, and made the long ride back to Catherine's farm. It was late afternoon when he arrived, and he was relieved to see everything looked peaceful. Catherine was in the garden, pulling up the last of the summer vegetables, and she waved when she saw him approaching. "Any trouble?" he asked as he dismounted. "Not a bit. Marcus hasn't shown his face, and everything's been quiet." She looked at the horses he'd brought with interest. "These are beautiful animals." "They're my best breeding stock," Harrison said with pride. 3 mares and 3 stallions. I've been building up bloodlines for 5 years now, and these represent the cream of the crop." They worked together to settle the new horses into the barn, and Harrison appreciated how quickly Catherine assessed each animal, noting their conformation and temperament with a knowledgeable eye. Over the next week, they fell into a rhythm that felt increasingly comfortable. They rose early, worked hard throughout the day, and spent the evenings talking over dinner or reading by the fire. Harrison moved some of Catherine's cattle to better pasture and repaired the fences that needed work. Catherine managed the household and the finances, showing Harrison her careful bookkeeping and discussing plans for the future. They were still sleeping in separate rooms, still maintaining a certain formality around each other, but Harrison could feel the walls between them slowly coming down. Catherine smiled more often, laughed at his jokes, sought his opinion on decisions large and small, and he found himself watching her when she didn't know he was looking, admiring the way she moved, the expressions that crossed her face, the competence with which she handled every task. The motion to reconsider was filed with the court, and Wright sent word that Judge Whitmore had agreed to hold a new hearing in 2 weeks. Marcus had filed a countermotion, arguing that the marriage was fraudulent and should not be considered, but the judge had denied that motion, stating that a legal marriage was a legal marriage regardless of motivation. We're going to have to present evidence that we can successfully manage the farm together," Wright wrote. "Be prepared to discuss your plans, your finances, and your experience. The judge will want to see that this isn't just a paper marriage." Harrison and Catherine spent hours preparing for the hearing, going over every detail of the farm's operation, creating detailed plans for the future, compiling records of their work over the past week. They gathered letters from neighbors attesting to Catherine's management of the farm over the past few years, and references from people who knew Harrison's reputation as a rancher. One evening, as they sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, Catherine suddenly laughed. "This is absurd," she said. "We have to prove to a judge that I'm capable of doing what I've been doing successfully for years. If I were a man, none of this would be necessary." "You're right," Harrison said. "It is absurd. But we play the hand we're dealt." Catherine looked at him, her expression serious. "You've been so good about all of this, patient with me, respectful of my space, willing to fight for something that isn't even really yours. Why? What are you getting out of this arrangement?" Harrison set down the pen he'd been holding. "Honestly, more than I expected. This farm, combined with my land, gives us real security and real potential. But it's more than that. I like working with you. I like the conversations we have, the way you think, the way you approach problems. I like being part of something bigger than just myself." He paused, then decided to be completely honest. "And I like you, Catherine. Not just as a partner, but as a person. I know that wasn't part of the original agreement, and I'm not asking you to feel the same way, but I want you to know that this marriage, for me, is becoming more than just a legal strategy." Catherine's eyes widened, and color rose in her cheeks. She was quiet for a long moment, and Harrison held his breath, wondering if he'd said too much too soon. "I like you too," she finally said softly. "I didn't expect to, but I do. You're kind and patient, and you treat me like an equal. That's rarer than you might think. Most men want a wife they can control, but you've given me partnership and respect." She looked down at her hands. "I'm not ready for everything a marriage usually entails, not yet. But I think I could be, given time. If that's something you want." Harrison reached across the table and took her hand, the gesture feeling natural now. "We have all the time we need," he said. "There's no rush. We'll figure this out together, at whatever pace feels right." The night before the hearing, neither of them slept well. Harrison could hear Catherine moving around in her room, and he lay awake, imagining all the ways the hearing could go wrong. What if the judge ruled against them anyway? What if Marcus had found some legal loophole they hadn't considered? What if all their work had been for nothing? But when morning came, Catherine appeared at breakfast calm and determined, wearing her green dress and with her hair pinned neatly up. "Whatever happens today," she said, "we've done everything we could. That has to be enough." The courthouse was more crowded than Harrison had expected when they arrived. News of the hearing had spread, and apparently the case of the woman fighting for her inheritance had caught the public's imagination. Harrison saw several women in the gallery, their faces sympathetic, and he hoped that might influence the judge's decision. Marcus was there with his lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Hendricks, who kept glancing at Harrison and Catherine with undisguised contempt. Wright met them outside the courtroom, his expression cautiously optimistic. "Judge Whitmore is a proud man," he said quietly. "He doesn't like being challenged, and he doesn't like admitting he might have been wrong. Our best strategy is to present so much evidence of your capability that he has no choice but to rule in your favor. Let him save face by saying that the circumstances have changed, rather than admitting his original ruling was unjust." When they entered the courtroom, Harrison felt Catherine's hand slip into his, her fingers cold and trembling slightly. He squeezed reassuringly, and they took their seats at the plaintiff's table. Judge Whitmore entered, a stern-looking man in his 60s with white hair and cold blue eyes. Everyone rose, and the hearing began. Wright presented their case methodically, starting with the marriage certificate and Harrison's credentials as a rancher. He called Harrison to the stand first, and Harrison answered questions about his experience, his financial situation, and his plans for managing Catherine's farm. He kept his answers clear and detailed, making sure to emphasize Catherine's capabilities alongside his own. "Mrs. Owens has extensive knowledge of this particular property," he said. "She knows the land, the livestock, the market conditions. My role is to support her and contribute my own experience, not to take over. This is a partnership in the truest sense." When it was Catherine's turn on the stand, she was calm and articulate, walking through the farm's accounts for the past 3 years, detailing the decisions she'd made and the results they'd achieved. She had every number memorized, every detail at her fingertips, and Harrison felt a surge of pride watching her. I'm not asking the court to rule in my favor because I'm helpless," she said at one point. "I'm asking the court to honor my father's wishes and recognize that I've proven my capability through years of successful management. The fact that I'm now married shouldn't make me more qualified in the court's eyes than I was when I was alone. But if having a husband is what it takes to satisfy outdated prejudices about women's abilities, then I'm fortunate to have found a partner who respects me enough to fight this battle by my side." Harrison saw Judge Whitmore's eyebrows rise at her frankness, but he couldn't tell if the judge was offended or impressed. Marcus took the stand for the defense, arguing that the marriage was a sham designed to circumvent the court's ruling. "She found herself some cowboy and convinced him to marry her just to steal my inheritance," he said. "This isn't a real marriage. They barely know each other." "How long did you know your wife before you married her?" Wright asked during cross-examination. Marcus blinked. "I don't see how that's relevant." "Answer the question, please." "We courted for 2 months." 2 months, Wright repeated. "And yet you don't question the validity of your own marriage? Mr. and Mrs. Owens may have known each other for a shorter time, but they've built a working partnership and made a legal commitment. The law doesn't require a minimum courtship period for a marriage to be valid." The hearing lasted most of the day, with both sides presenting witnesses and arguments. By the time Judge Whitmore called for a recess to consider his decision, Harrison felt wrung out. Catherine looked pale but composed, her hand still holding his tightly. They waited in the hallway, unable to eat or even talk much. Wright paced, reviewing his notes. Marcus and his lawyer sat at the far end of the hall, talking in low, angry voices. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 45 minutes, they were called back into the courtroom. Judge Whitmore looked stern and somewhat irritated, and Harrison's heart sank. "I've considered the evidence presented today," the judge began, "as well as the original ruling and the circumstances that have changed since that ruling was made. This court does not appreciate attempts to circumvent its decisions, and I was initially inclined to deny the motion to reconsider." Harrison felt Catherine's hand tighten in his, and he squeezed back, trying to offer what comfort he could. "However," the judge continued, "after reviewing the extensive evidence of Mrs. Owens's management of the property prior to her father's death, as well as the testimony regarding her continued management after his passing, I find that the original concern about her ability to run the farm alone was perhaps overstated." Marcus leaned forward, his face reddening. Furthermore, Judge Whitmore said, "Mrs. Owens is no longer alone. She has entered into a legal marriage with a man of demonstrated ranching experience and sound financial standing. The concerns that led to the original ruling are therefore no longer applicable. The judge looked directly at Catherine. Mrs. Owens, I must say that I don't appreciate your implication that this court is motivated by prejudice. However, I also cannot ignore the evidence that you have successfully managed your father's farm for several years. The law seeks justice, not strict adherence to tradition when tradition conflicts with fairness. Harrison held his breath. Therefore, Judge Whitmore said, I am reversing my previous ruling. The farm will remain in Mrs. Catherine Owens's possession, as specified in her father's will. Mr. Marcus Morris's claim to the property is hereby denied. Mrs. Owens has 30 days to compensate her uncle for any improvements he may have made to the property during the time he believed it to be his, though, from the evidence presented, it appears he made none. The courtroom erupted in noise. Harrison heard gasps and murmurs from the gallery, heard Marcus shouting something angry and incoherent. But all he could focus on was Catherine, who had buried her face in her hands and was crying, her shoulders shaking. He put his arm around her, pulling her close, not caring who saw or what they thought. We won, he murmured. Catherine, we won. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. We won, she repeated, as if she couldn't quite believe it. The farm is mine. Ours. Wright was shaking their hands, congratulating them. People from the gallery were coming up to offer their support, particularly several women who praised Catherine's courage in fighting the ruling. Marcus stormed out of the courtroom without a word, his lawyer following. It was over. After all the fear and uncertainty, all the scrambling and planning, it was finally over. Catherine's inheritance was secure, and she would never have to worry about losing her home again. They walked out of the courthouse into the late afternoon sunshine, and Harrison felt like the whole world looked brighter. Catherine was still crying, but they were tears of relief and joy now, and he let her cry, understanding that she needed to release all the pent-up emotion of the past week. Thank you, she said when she could finally speak. Thank you for believing in me, for fighting for me, for giving me back my home. It was always yours, Harrison said. We just had to make the judge see it. They stayed in Independence that night, celebrating with a nice dinner at the hotel restaurant. Wright joined them, pleased with the outcome and already thinking ahead to how they could prevent any future challenges to Catherine's ownership. Miki. Make sure you record the marriage and the judge's ruling with the county, he advised, and I'd suggest having a lawyer draw up a proper will for both of you, specifying what happens to the property if anything should happen to either of you. That way there can be no question. When they finally returned to the farm the next day, Catherine stood on the porch for a long moment, just looking out at the land. It's really mine, she said softly. I don't have to leave. I can stay here and build the life my father wanted for me. It's really ours, Harrison corrected gently. We're partners now, remember? She turned to him, and there was something in her eyes he hadn't seen before, a warmth that made his heart beat faster. Partners, she agreed. But maybe something more too? Harrison stepped closer to her. I'd like that, he said, if you would. Catherine reached up and touched his face, a tender gesture that made him hold his breath. I would, she said. I know we started this marriage for practical reasons, but somewhere along the way it became real for me. You became real for me. I'd like to see where this could go if we let it. He kissed her then. Not the chaste press of lips from their wedding, but a real kiss full of promise and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. The next few months passed in a blur of hard work and growing affection. Harrison officially moved all of his operations to Catherine's farm, which they both now called their home. They worked together to improve the property, adding new fences, expanding the herd, training horses. Harrison taught Catherine some of his breaking techniques, and she showed him the intricacies of her father's cattle breeding program. The physical distance between them gradually closed as well. Harrison moved from the guest room to Catherine's bedroom, and they discovered a passion and tenderness with each other that made their marriage feel truly complete. Catherine bloomed under the combined security of knowing her home was safe and the affection of a husband who truly valued her. They became known in the area as a formidable team, the couple who had fought the law and won, who ran one of the most successful ranching operations in the valley. Other women began to seek Catherine's advice, asking how she'd managed to keep her property rights, how she balanced running a ranch with being a wife. Catherine always gave the same answer. Find a partner who sees you as an equal, not a possession. The rest will follow. By the following spring, Catherine announced she was pregnant. Harrison was thrilled and terrified in equal measure, worrying about her health and the risks of childbirth. But Catherine faced the prospect with her usual calm determination. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she told him when he fussed over her. "I'll be fine, and our child will be born into a home filled with love and security, which is the greatest gift we could give." Their son was born in November of 1884, a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him Samuel, after Catherine's father, and Harrison thought his heart might burst with the love he felt holding his son for the first time. Catherine proved to be as capable a mother as she was a rancher, managing the baby and the farm with impressive efficiency. Harrison, who had never imagined himself as a father, discovered a tenderness in himself he hadn't known existed. He would sit for hours just watching Samuel sleep, marveling at the tiny miracle they'd created. As Samuel grew, the ranch prospered. They expanded their operations, bought adjacent land when it became available, built a new barn and a larger house. The original farmhouse became a guest house for the ranch hands they hired as the operation grew. Marcus never forgave them for winning the court case and kept his distance, which suited everyone fine. But other members of Catherine's extended family, impressed by her success and perhaps a bit ashamed of Marcus's behavior, reached out to rebuild relationships. Catherine was cautious at first, but eventually allowed some of them back into her life, particularly a cousin who had always been kind to her. 3 years after Samuel's birth, Catherine gave birth to twin daughters, Emma and Sarah. The house was chaos for a while, full of crying babies and exhausted parents, but it was a happy chaos. Harrison would sometimes stop in the middle of feeding the horses or mending a fence and just shake his head in wonder at how much his life had changed since that day he'd seen Catherine crying on the courthouse steps. "Do you ever regret it?" Catherine asked him one evening when the children were finally asleep and they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. "Taking on my problems? Marrying a stranger? All of it?" Harrison pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Not for a single second," he said. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me. This life we've built together, this family, this home, it's everything I never knew I wanted." "I love you," Catherine said, not for the first time, but with the same wonder she always felt saying it. This man who had stepped in when she had nothing, who had fought for her and with her, who had proven every day that he valued her as a partner and loved her as a wife. "I love you too," Harrison said. "Always." Years passed and their family continued to grow. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. The twins were inseparable, partners in mischief and adventure. 2 more children followed, another son named Jack and a daughter named Rose, filling the house with noise and laughter. The ranch became one of the most successful in the region, known for quality horses and cattle. Harrison and Catherine's partnership became legendary, the story of how they'd met and married told and retold until it took on an almost mythical quality. Young couples would sometimes seek them out for advice, wanting to know the secret to their obvious happiness. "There's no secret," Catherine would always say, "just respect, honesty, and the willingness to work together toward common goals. And maybe a little luck in finding the right partner." Harrison would add, "And never underestimate a woman's capability. The smartest thing I ever did was recognize how capable Catherine was and support her rather than trying to control her." As they grew older and their children grew up, taking on more and more of the ranch work, Harrison and Catherine had time to simply enjoy each other's company. They would ride out to their favorite spot overlooking the valley, the place where they could see all the land they'd built together, and talk for hours about everything and nothing. "Do you remember that first night?" Catherine asked on one such ride, when they were both well into their 50s, their hair gray but their love as strong as ever. "When you found me outside the courthouse? I remember thinking you were the saddest thing I'd ever seen," Harrison said, "and also the bravest. You were broken but not defeated. I knew right then I wanted to help you, though I had no idea how much you'd end up helping me." "I was so scared," Catherine admitted. "Scared of losing everything, scared of trusting you, scared of the unknown. But you made me feel safe. You gave me back my future." "We gave each other our futures," Harrison corrected. "I was just a lonely cowboy with a string of horses before I met you. You gave me a family, a real home, a purpose beyond just surviving. You gave me love." Catherine leaned over and kissed him, right there on horseback, and Harrison kissed her back with all the passion and tenderness that more than 20 years of marriage had built between them. Their children all married well, finding partners who loved and respected them as Harrison and Catherine had loved and respected each other. The grandchildren came, filling the ranch with new energy and laughter. Samuel took over the primary management of the ranch, though Harrison and Catherine remained active and involved. The twins married brothers and moved to a neighboring ranch, staying close enough to visit often. Jack went to college and became a lawyer, inspired by the story of his mother's court battle. Rose married a veterinarian, and they settled in Independence, caring for the animals of the valley. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party that brought together half the valley. People who had been in the courthouse that day came to share their memories. Wright, now retired and quite elderly, gave a toast about the most unconventional case he'd ever won. Even some people who had sided with Marcus initially came, having long since recognized the injustice of his claim and impressed by what Harrison and Catherine had built together. Harrison stood to give a speech, Catherine's hand in his. 30 years ago, he said, I was riding through Independence when I saw a woman in despair. I had no idea that stopping to help her would change my entire life. I had no idea that a practical arrangement would turn into the greatest love I've ever known. Catherine, you've been my partner, my best friend, my love, and the mother of my children. You've made every day an adventure and every challenge worth facing. Here's to 30 more years together. The crowd cheered and applauded. Catherine stood and kissed him, tears in her eyes. You fixed what the judge had broken, she said softly, just for him. But more than that, you taught me that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. I love you, Harrison Owens. I love you too, Catherine Owens, he replied, always and forever. As the party continued around them, music playing and people dancing, Harrison looked around at everything they'd built, the thriving ranch, the happy children, the community that had embraced them. It had all started with a moment of compassion, a decision to help someone in need, and it had grown into something more beautiful than he ever could have imagined. Years continued to pass, gentler now, filled with the rhythms of ranch life and the joys of watching their grandchildren grow. Harrison and Catherine spent their days working together as they always had, though at a slower pace now, and their evenings sitting together on the porch, holding hands and watching the sun set over their land. When Harrison was 72, he fell ill with pneumonia. Catherine nursed him through it with the same fierce determination she'd brought to every challenge in their lives together. He recovered, but they both knew they were entering the twilight of their lives, and they held each other a little tighter, treasured each day a little more. I need you to promise me something, Catherine said one evening as they sat watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. If I go first, I need you to promise you'll be all right, that you'll keep living, keep enjoying life. I could never be all right without